Hello, my name is Liliana Brown, and I'm going to be presenting my Project 3, Part 2 for American Studies 350, Section 1, California Culture. A written script and a PDF of the presentation will be attached in the submission box as well. According to the Los Angeles Homeless Services authorities, there is a 12% increase in homelessness as of January 2020, totaling to now over 60,000 people experiencing homelessness in LA. Even though the city is working hard and has housed over 6,000 homeless people, there's a steady influx of people becoming homeless, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. While the government facilities focus on long-term goals of housing, we look forward to immediate results, which for us is food. Our company is Service on Wheels, is a nonprofit organization that brings food and donations to homeless population all over LA via a food truck. Service on Wheels will have a donation center where that is their home base and anyone can drop off food or money. Then our team will organize it. After that, the food truck will go out to the homeless camps throughout Los Angeles, serving fresh meals to anyone who needs them, as well as distributing to any donated non-perishable items for them to keep. Our mission is to serve the people in our community who need it most with dignity. The truck allows us to go to homeless or low-income neighborhoods when it is not safe to travel for them. It also allows a more friendly atmosphere to help them, whereas going to shelters or food drives may be embarrassing. This method allows volunteers to safely interact with anyone. Now, how did I personally get here? I've always been involved with a variety of volunteer programs. I was exposed to many different methods of interacting with others. For example, the puppy truck that dropped off our very first guide dog for the blind puppy on the top left, that was very efficient and very useful. And to the right, my church put on a Christmas shows for entertainment. That's me body painting. But simultaneously, while I was helping all these people, I was taught to avoid homeless in my everyday life and areas that they may be in because I was a woman and it's dangerous for me. I also noticed several problems with how many of these organizations ran. First, many homeless people had no transportation or were unable to use public transport. Um, for example, the picture on the left is when I volunteer every year at the Banning Community Center in Wilmington for Christmas Eve. There are always people who arrive late when we run out of food and presents because it's not because they forgot the time or they didn't have the day off, but because they had to rely on buses or they walked. Many families also felt embarrassed coming to homeless shelters or food drives and did not want to use their name or take pictures. Secondly, there was very little I could do in person in downtown Los Angeles, where the highest rate of homelessness was and is. Just walking on the street, I can get, and frequently do, get catcalled or yelled at by mentally unstable homeless people, and I didn't and still don't feel comfortable wandering around trying to help. And lastly, during this COVID pandemic, many of the nonprofits I've noticed are run by older retired people who are now considered high risk. This kind of shuts down the in-person part and tries to stop the online progress that they can reach other people. Now, I was also inspired by this from the 2019 Trucks Giving that LA food trucks came in Long Beach. They fed over 1,000 people at this event, and it was about a team of 15 trucks that came and fed. And I thought it was so simple and so brilliant and so efficient that I decided to use it on my own. So it's a simple solution for a very huge problem. Our mission is to serve people within our own community who need it the most. So this creates a more safe and friendly environment and still allows surrounding communities to help through us. Now, unfortunately, California is no stranger to homelessness. Although the word may be relatively modern, a theme of displacement is clear throughout California history. From the recorded history of the conquistadors invading California throughout the 1400s and the 1500s, the natives' land and home were constantly being taken away and their culture systematically destroyed. Often the poorest or more racially hated lived homeless or in dire conditions forced upon them by the ruling class. But as California cities developed from farmland and later gold was found, homelessness became now what we think of it. San Francisco and Los Angeles uh, developed into these huge cities, but they also had huge slums of low income, working class, or wandering people. The farming communities especially relied on this rotating vagrant population for seasonal harvests, but they would not need them all year round. For the past 50 years, California has been starting to focus special attention on the homeless population. During the Great Depression, Dorothea Lange and her partner Paul Taylor recorded the desperate living situations that immigrants looking for work lived in. The development of the camera and other recording devices broke this mythically beautiful California, a stereotype, and created national sympathy for the poorest in our community. Social safety nets started to be put in place, and this became a development as history progressed into the modern era where we now are. California progress continued to displace many, often low income neighborhoods, and one example that is a huge problem in LA is Skid Row, also known as 50 blocks of East downtown LA, that has a large homeless population. The name Skid Row comes from Skid Row Road, which is in the mid 1800s referred to the roads made by the railway workers pulling cut logs away from the sites and creating these grooves in the ground. Most of these workers were Chinese or other immigrants getting paid pennies, and these men needed a place to live while they worked. Cheap housing as well as taverns tended to line these roads to cater to the men's needs, um, and it became known as a part of town to be avoided. Farm work and sometimes railway work then became seasonal, which led to alcoholism and homelessness prevalent in the city because these workers had nothing to do and no way to support themselves. Um, then developed the churches gathered and created soup kitchens or shelters in these specific areas to try to lower the amount of homeless people in their town. In the late 1800s, railway workers started to be built in Los Angeles, and these kinds of neighborhoods started to develop here. Thus, the name was shortened to Skid Row, and it's been called that ever since. Um, During the 1930s, during the Great Depression, there was an influx of people gathering at Skid Row because it was already a neighborhood with affordable housing and shelters and soup kitchens. Became a pattern with each generation in coming into California, as there was a 1950s economic depression and Vietnam veterans in the 1970s came in. Not only that, but in the 1960s, most of the buildings had become run down and they were not up to code. After World War II and the California economic boom, real estate values skyrocketed. So many low-income neighborhoods, such as Skid Row, were displaced to make room for more expensive housing. During between 1950 and 2000, all the buildings were destroyed and replaced, pushing about 15,000 people out on the street or into shelters. Many simply camped out on the sidewalk, eventually making a huge homeless community there. In the 1980s, activists and local business owners started to make a fuss about the large amount of homeless people living in this area, and a housing trust fund was created in 1989. But today, there are about 4,000 to 8,000 homeless people living in this part of town. As you can see, this is a historical and modern problem that Los Angeles continues to battle. Homelessness has been on the rise in California, even with more programs provided. 60% of people forced into homelessness say it is because of economic struggle, and about 30% of the homelessness population deal with serious mental or physical illness. We know that these problems are long-standing and often systematic, but we can believe that we can make a difference one meal at a time. So, how do we help? We've devised 4 simple steps. First, to donate, we depend on our community as a nonprofit organization and have a home base of a donation center where people can drop off food or money. Then we have 2 trucks. One goes half the week to pick up from different locations donations, and the other one goes out all day. This is because the other half of the week we can have 2 trucks and twice as much food being delivered out to all the communities in LA that need it the most and help them. Our target audience would be African American men ages 25 to 50. This is because 60% of all the people experiencing homelessness in LA County are 24 to 55, and approximately 70% are male. Unlike other donation centers, we can travel around and reach a demographic in a dignified and more efficient way. This allows us to travel, to interact safely with the guests, and to interact with them in a dignified, friendly environment. Just like the Long Beach Trucks Giving showed us, this could be easily accessible throughout LA and provide food in a more efficient and fun atmosphere. Instead of seeing other nonprofits or government programs as competitors, we see them as our community. We look forward to working with others and sharing information about benefits from these other companies on our food truck. Our goal is not to push down others, but to lift up Los Angeles. We mainly see using social media platforms and online computer systems to promote our nonprofit. We plan to connect with other nonprofits that are focusing on homelessness in Los Angeles in an all contactless way, and thus get to different news sources and people who may be looking for a way to help others. Now, for our financial plan to function, we would need to receive about $30,000 a month in donations, either money or the food equivalent. One truck with a kitchen equipment included would cost about $30,000 to $40,000, plus $200 a month for gas and upkeep at least. To support 4 full-time employees, we would need a budget of about $190,000 per year. This would total our annual budget to about $400,000 a year. But we believe we can make an impact. 45%, almost half of our budget, goes to directly feeding others. 3% of all homeless populations live in a small area, and because of the way that Los Angeles is organized, we can access many people in a short amount of distance so that the trucks can travel and reach way more people. And on average, food trucks can serve between 50 and 100 people per hour, which means by our estimates that we can feed over 1,000 people per day. Los Angeles is in desperate need of change, and for generations we have pushed aside the more vulnerable in our community, and we need to break this cycle for ourselves. Let them know you care and help us serve. Thank you so much for your time.